Hello, everyone. This is Karie Kaufmann here. Joining me today is Peter Boolkah, and we are excited to be live with you today. Do me a favor before we get in. If you're joining us live, be sure to leave us a comment and let us know where you're watching from. I am based in San Diego, California. Peter is joining me from London in the UK. So hopefully, we'll have people from all over the world joining us from different time zones. But for those of you who don't know Peter, if you're watching this on my channel and you've never met Peter before, Peter is my business coach. But he's not just a coach for coaches, he's a coach for businesses as well. He's also certified with Scaling Up and Action Coach, as am I. And Peter, I'll let you give a little bit more about your background before we dive into today's topic today, which is scaling your business in the new economy.
Yeah, I think you've adequately covered it, actually. Yes, I'm a coach. I, I tend to work with businesses that are looking to scale out to a point of exit. So whether you're scaling your business to sell it, you want to transfer it from one generation to next, you're looking for an IPO, or you're ultimately just looking to have a business that can run without you. All of these are points of exit, and I tend to help hyper-growth businesses get to that point.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're taking the time to be here with us today. And our topic is about scaling in the new economy. So, what do you think that means? What is the new economy, and what are we supposed to do that's different than what we've been doing for the past 16 months?
And that's an interesting sort of topic. I mean, the reality is, Carrie, as human beings, we're probably not the best program for change. And if you look at the last 18 months, we've probably had the most change, we've experienced the most change that we've probably done since 2008, 2009. And fundamentally, I've never seen a world become totally locked down. That's what we've experienced. We've had people displaced from offices for a long period of time. I mean, we've had shopping malls in the UK closed, businesses closed, and new habits have formed. And I think when we talk about new economy, I would say that very much money has shifted. When you look at it, money still flows, but it's flowing very, very differently to what it was before.
Yeah,
And it's actually understanding how that money now flows and actually how do we take advantage of it?
that's a great point. Something that we're experiencing in the US, and you can tell me if this has been true for you in the UK, is that we're in a boom, right? And it's expected to be somewhat sustainable. And what makes this boom different from other booms that we've had in our lifetime was that pre-pandemic, our economy was fundamentally healthy, meaning that there was no major housing bubble. Consumer debt was considered to be relatively low. Mortgages were stable. And so something that's different about this one is that people have cash. And there's some people who don't, and a lot of businesses and industries that have been unfairly really affected by the pandemic, but others that really have cash. And so there's this pent up demand, but as you mentioned, it's being spent differently. It's flowing differently to different types of industries, different types of priorities. But we're seeing that consumer spending is up over pre-pandemic rates, and that lots of things are still very, very much stable. But one thing that I've seen, you can tell me if you've experienced it as well, is sting my clients is the inflation, particularly around wages and finding people and paying their people. Have you experienced that as well?
Well, yep. So there's definitely a shortage of labour. I think in the UK it might be a little bit different. We've got a couple of scenarios for that. Number one, we're out of the European Union and we were quite heavily reliant on labour from the European Union. And because of the lockdowns and everything, actually to do trans-border crossing has been quite difficult. So we've not really had free movement into the UK. On top of that, we've had really heavy and generous government subsidies where we've had people that have been able to stay at home and not necessarily have to go into
Right.
work. And the government's paid 80% of their wages. So when you're getting paid 80% not to do anything, the challenge is you're not exactly the most super motivated person out there to go and look for another job.
Yep, we've
So you
experienced that too.
yeah, so you got a totally artificial scenario. So people are getting paid, they've got nowhere to go because the country's been locked down. Various countries, you can't do the international travel you once did. So people are spending their money differently, as you said. They've got more money on deposit than they've had before. It's not true for everyone, but it's true for many people. And what you've tended to find is a lot of people put their money into bricks and mortar, whether they're moving to bigger houses, whether they're sort of remodeling their house, and money's being spent in that method.
Yep. And I have a lot of clients right now who are just struggling to keep up with the demand because they're experiencing the boom in demand, but they can't find either the labor or the supply chain, right? That's backed up that they're not able to fill the demand. So the mantra I've been preaching to them is make hay while the sun shines. Nothing's going to last forever. So capitalize on the uptick that we've got, but then they're finding it hard to actually execute on that because of the shortage of labor or backlog and supply chain. You
And I
experience that
would
as well?
and I would say that's absolutely spot on. I would say that, and again, a mixture of things, but the supply chain has been very, very tight. And on top of that, the supply chain's been highly inflated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, especially in the building
Yeah.
industry. Any creative things that your clients have been doing lately to help with that kind of clog in the recruiting system or to attract people when either they don't have to work or they're content with their current job. Maybe they are gainfully employed, but your client's looking to hire and looking to recruit them away from whatever they're doing. Any creative tips that you've seen for that lately?
First and foremost, they're focusing on retention. So making
Mm.
sure they stop the bleeding. Make sure they stop people leaving, giving them a reason to
And
say,
how are they
actually, do you
doing
know what?
that?
Connecting better with people, being more purposeful with their communication. I think we took a lot for granted prior to the pandemic. We were quite sort of busy people.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, yeah, I think we just let life get in the way. Now people are a lot more considered. I think there's a lot more around mental health. So it's actually finding that stuff around the people where they're at. How do we change our working practices? So do we need people fully in the office all the time, or can we go for that more blended working solution where it's part office, part sort of home office? We're
Yeah.
getting better at using technology to facilitate that. So that's first and foremost, being stronger around people. And secondly, it's very much around, well, if you can't get people, how do you start changing the technology within the business? How do you start looking at systems and processes? How do you start modernizing the business so perhaps you're not that reliant on new people? How can you scale it without needing more people? How do you become more
Absolutely.
efficient? So we're looking at efficiencies in all fairness.
Yeah, I like that you started with that because there's a movement here in the U.S. they're calling the Great Resignation, and that it's I think something around 25% of Americans are planning to or have recently quit their jobs. Um, and there's lots of reasons for it. If you read several of the articles, a lot of it is, kind of pent up. Moves that maybe they would have made a year ago, but the timing wasn't right. So they've just been putting it off until they feel like they've got different opportunities. Or that maybe they weren't super pleased with how their company handled the pandemic or they don't see where their future is. So for this combination of reasons, imagine if 25% of your workforce is considering quitting, is a as a business owner, as a leader, are you prepared for that and making sure that your best people that you're investing in your A players to retain them? Because how much is it's going to cost you to replace them could be a painful thing.
And what I'm seeing with some businesses is they were carrying people full time when they didn't really have a full time job.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of people are leaving companies and contracted back out to the same company, but only not just them, but they're picking up other companies at the same time.
Yep.
So instead of just servicing the one, they're servicing the many.
Absolutely. I have
So
a client
that's what you,
doing that exact same thing right now, and honestly, they're just thankful to still have access to the talent.
and that's the
But it's
thing. But
different.
more importantly, that talent now is getting other perspectives from other businesses. So when they come back in, they're adding more value to the business in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I just attended a conference over the past couple of days, my first business travel in 17 months. So that was exciting. But one of the segments that they did was it was in the speaking industry for professional speakers. And what a lot of that industry has obviously been hit very hard. Those who only that was their only thing that they did was speaking, and all those events got canceled. So they did a segment called Permanent Pivots, which is just little quick bits, little 5-minute segments on what are the things that these entrepreneurs have learned through the pandemic that actually, in hindsight, is worth keeping. Right? There's some things you do only when it's necessary, and there's other things that you're like, actually, we need to continue with this. This is a really, we wouldn't have made this shift if we weren't forced to, but now that we've made it, we intend to keep it and capitalize on it. And I don't think that that's unique to any one industry. I think every business can be asking themselves that. Have you seen any permanent pivots that your clients have made that they're like, oh, we wouldn't have ever chose to do it that way, but now that we're here, it's
I'll give you one great example, the use of video. Pre-pandemic, I would have clients that would never have entertained the whole idea around Zoom or some other video conferencing platform. Overnight, they've had no choice but to pivot and change. And actually, from a productivity point of view, it's absolutely awesome. They've got so much time back. They're able to do a lot more now than they've ever done before. Same with their teams. And also the online productivity tools, whether it's Mural, whether it's what you said, Prezi. I mean, there's so many different tools out there now. That's been a whole growth industry
yeah,
around how do we better present and communicate online. And that's a great example where companies pivoted, saw an opportunity in the market, thought, okay, that's where the money's going to be, and they've highly capitalized on it and done a great job.
absolutely. Any final tips for leaders who need to prepare? What else should they be preparing for or looking at?
I
Um,
think first and foremost, one of the things that you've got to do is be connected. I think as a leader, we need to be connected with other business leaders. And Kevin's just put a comment. He's built a business on Zoom in the last 12 months.
yeah,
And prior to that, Kevin always had the dream of going to living in France, which he's done. He's moved to the France. But prior to that, his business model would have been, well, I'm going to continuously travel back to the UK. I don't think he's been back to the UK once since he's moved to France because obviously of lockdowns, but that hasn't stopped him building that business. So I think first and foremost, business leaders need to be connected. They need to be connected with other people, and they need to be exchanging what they're seeing,
absolutely.
so that their eyes are wide open. So
Yeah,
they're seeing the trends, they're seeing what's going on, so that they're making decisions based on current data. And most
that's a great
importantly,
point.
they're not making decisions based on what the media is purporting out there. Because you and I know how distorted the media's viewpoint can be.
You're telling me that everything that I see in the media is not true?
Oh, so sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to keep your eyes open and be looking at the trends because there are some. We talk about permanent pivots for our business, but that's something that consumers are making. Other businesses, your clients, your suppliers are all asking themselves that same question. So trends will start to shift, and you've got to kind of zoom out for a little bit, which is really hard to do when you're running full speed ahead and pause and say, where is this going? What's changed over the past year? What do we see continuing to change and evolve? And how can we even get a step ahead of it or capitalize on it? Kind of get your ducks in a row, which is tricky when you don't even know where your ducks are at, right? You gotta
No,
kind of find them and line
absolutely.
them up.
And the thing is, we've got to be really agile and actually accept the fact we're probably in one of the greatest periods of innovation.
Absolutely.
And what you're seeing is that there's continuous improvements on how we can do things. And because we don't have the answer today, keep looking because the answer's coming very quickly. Whether it's
Yep.
the use of apps, whether it's use of software subscriptions, there is so much change out there. Everyone now is working at how they can make this situation work better.
Right.
And I think we need to be open to innovation and we need to be open to change. I,
Absolutely.
I cannot begin to tell you how many different kind of collaboration tools I've been cycling through over the last 18 months. And some of these tools, I've bought a subscription and I bought a yearly subscription and it's got me to maybe 4 or 5 months, but then something is much better out there that's far more slicker and actually instead of just seeing out my rest of my term on that particular subscription because I paid for it, it's been better for me and my business to switch to the new
Jump
one
ship.
because it's more moving forward. And Kevin asked the question, do we think we're moving to a hybrid way of working, a mix of a whole old and new? Kevin, great question. I think we've already moved there.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think a lot of people are in denial and they're just catching up with their denial.
Yep. I would say most of my clients are in that position. I do have one or two who have gone back in 100%. Somewhere it was necessary. If they actually have physical work to do, then they've been on site the whole time. But the other people who have been working virtually, they're getting them back into the offices. But most of my clients are being a bit more flexible with that, or creating some kind of a hybrid schedule. They're changing their office spaces. Most of them still want or need an office space, but they might utilize it differently than they have in the past. So I think that's one of the things that's probably here to stay for a lot of businesses or a lot of industries.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say that it's taught us is when we do end up being in a sort of in-person situation, we're more purposeful about that interaction.
Yeah,
Where before we were like ships in the night. We wouldn't talk with one another, we would communicate at one another. Whereas now, that time that we've got to spend with one another is so valuable, you're finding that people are thinking, okay, what do I want out of this time?
yep,
So it's
absolutely.
teaching us a lot of new things.
And just a reminder, if you're joining us live or even if you catch the recording, leave us a comment and let us know where in the world you're joining us from. I'm here in San Diego. Peter is in the UK, and we'd love to see who else is joining us. If you got any questions, feel free to drop them in, or comments, anything to add that your business has done to just continue to scale up, shifts that you've made moving into this new economy. We'd love to hear your insights and perspectives or questions that you've got to have. We see Erica made a comment here. Being part of a hybrid environment is very convenient in today's world. Absolutely, especially in Erica's situation, as in millions of other people. When you got a little one at home who's maybe not able to go to school, doing remote learning, or their schools are closed or whatnot. So awesome, thank you for that.
I'll tell you what, one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people that are doing the remote working, they're having their working day cut from 8 hours to 6 hours. And very much the reason being is because actually those hours are far more sort of condensed. So
Yeah,
you haven't got the interruption that you perhaps would have in the office. And what you're finding is actually that people, because they don't have that interruption, they're getting far more done. But they're also becoming zoned out and tired a lot quicker because their
right.
productivity is much higher.
Yeah. Pam made a comment here. See, so many business owners have their ducks quacking, but don't line them up. I love that visual. Using
Yeah, that,
situation for poor communication and poor performance. If you're trying to still, stick old systems together instead of adapting to make it work, then yeah, your ducks are quacking, but they're not lined up.
and the problem is they're sitting ducks and eventually they just get shot.
Right.
So we'll leave Pam with that visual.
Thanks, Pam. Any final thoughts, Peter, before we wrap up this episode today?
I think the only final thought I would have is this: be agile, be very agile, be very open, and be very aware of what's going on out there. And as I say, be highly optimistic about the future, but be drastically prepared for the worst.
Mm,
You've got to be
good
prepared for
advice.
the worst. We just don't look. Everyone's saying we're coming out of this. It's all looking rosy. And that's the government saying that. You've got the WHO saying, well, we're nowhere near the end yet. No
No.
one knows really how this is going to play out.
Right.
So you've got to be prepared that the worst can possibly happen. And how do you mitigate that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, my final thought then, as for leaders, would be take time to think. As busy as we are, especially for the industries that really have had that uptick, and I know you're busy, you always have been, you always will be. So the time won't make itself. You have to make the time to get together with your leadership team, get together with your coach, make sure that you're thinking strategically. We have two parts to our model. There's strategic thinking, and then there's execution planning. So we can't just get so wrapped up in execution and delivery that we forget to zoom out and do the strategic thinking about where is this going, things that we can possibly predict and things we can't predict at all, but we need to prepare for anyway. So I see we've reached as far as South Africa. Hi, Lindy in France. Good to see you guys here today. So thanks so much for joining us. Whether you catch this live or you catch a recording after the fact, we're really glad to have you here with us today and hope this was helpful to you. Feel free to leave us a comment and share your ideas, share your top takeaways, or anything you have to add to the conversation. We'd love to hear it.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
very
much.
much, and thanks for having me, Karie.
Thanks, Peter. Good to see you.
Take care, everyone.